All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Royal We Fellowship. Shabbat Shalom. I'm so happy that you are here. We are getting started a few minutes later. I apologize for that. It's still brisk. It's still cold here in the Midwest in St. Louis. And I'm really wishing that spring would just come in and make everything warmer and feel a whole lot better because wearing these jackets in this cold weather is no fun. But I'm excited to be here with you this morning. Again, Shabbat Shalom. Good morning. And I hope that you have a blessed weekend. A couple of announcements. If you're new to Royal We Fellowship, welcome. Happy that you're here with us this morning. Now, if you would like to support Royal We Fellowship, and now Royal We Fellowship is an effort to look at the ancient literature of the Bible and apply our understanding of narcissism and the toxicity of the world that we live in. And it really brings a different perspective to the ancient literature. We're able to gain a deeper understanding in our own lives as we look at the ancient literature. If you would like to be a supporter of this, if you are inspired to do so, you're never required, but if you are inspired to support, you can do so with the PayPal links down below. In addition to that, as many of you know, I have accepted a challenge with Rappel for Mission St. Louis, and in less than 30 days, I'm going to be rappelling down 19 stories of a hotel in downtown St. Louis, the Four Seasons Hotel. That's going to be right around the corner. I'm not able to do that without your support, and the Royal We community has offered a lot of support already, but it's never too late to continue to offer support, so the link for that is also down below, and that support goes to Mission St. Louis, and it's a huge effort. It's a huge mission. I've visited them a couple of times. They do a lot of great things for the community. Their focus is rebuilding and just helping the people of the parts of St. Louis that nobody really wants to go. And there are those places in St. Louis, if you know what I mean. A lot of those places. Now, with that, let's jump into our morning session here, and I'm going to go ahead and open up in prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, how holy is your name. And your kingdom will come, and your will shall be done here on this earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day and each and every day our daily bread, and forgive us of our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from the evil that's in this world. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. And everybody says, amen. And there is an awful lot of evil in this world, is there not? Is there not? Now, we've been following the life of Jacob. Obviously, we have gone on the Royal We Fellowship from Abraham through Isaac, through Jacob, and now we are going to get into the life of Joseph, and everybody knows the story of Joseph later on. But what we are seeing right now is the pre-story of Joseph before he becomes an Egyptian, before he becomes the savior, if you will, of not only Egypt, but all the surrounding territories. We see Joseph as the youngest son of Jacob. Now, Jacob, when he met his wives, who were the daughters of Laban, he started having children. And if you remember in the chapters past, Leah and Rachel are Jacob's two wives, right? Rachel was the one he loved. Leah was the one that Laban kind of tricked him into marrying first, okay? And for whatever reason, well, we know the reason now, but Rachel was not able to have children. But Leah, the one that Jacob was tricked into marrying, had all kinds of kids. And in chapters before, we were talking about this, when we read through this, she had a lot of children. Leah had a lot of children. Rachel was getting impatient, and so she started giving Jacob her servants and said, here, have children with them so they could be mine. So Jacob had a lot of children. I counted 10, at least, before we get up to Joseph. Joseph was finally when Rachel's womb opened up. It says in the ancient literature, and a few chapters before, that God opened up Rachel's womb and she gave Jacob a son. And they named him Joseph. So Joseph is the youngest one of all of them. Joseph is also uh, a miracle in that Rachel's womb was closed for so long, but then it was opened by God. Finally, they were able to have a child together. All right. So, but Joseph has all these other sons, all these other children. And it's important to understand this because all these other children are also much older. If you think about it, 10 children at least before Joseph. We're talking about 20 to 30-year differences in ages of these kids. And this is going to play a huge role in what we're about to read. So open up with me if you haven't already. We're in Genesis chapter 37. And we've already talked about the animosity that was growing in Genesis chapter 37 between Joseph, who's the youngest one, and his brothers, his older brothers, which range in age difference from 20 to 30 years. Joseph was like any other young child. He was adventurous. He was a big dreamer, right? And he was having visions and dreams of superiority. He was having visions and dreams in his young age of, as we read before, I'll go ahead and read some of the dreams that he had that we were talking about. In some of the dreams, if I could find it, I'm going back to the last chapter. Bear with me one moment. Joseph had a dream, and this is chapter 37, verse 5. He told his brothers, "Listen, I had a dream. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." Now, I know that we have a hard time understanding what does this mean, the sheaf rising and this and that. But essentially, the dream was that what Joseph had in life and what Joseph worked with and what Joseph was given as a purpose in life was that something of standing upright and others around him bowing down to it. Basically, he was saying, guys, I had this dream that I was there and people were bowing down to what I was doing. That was Joseph's dream. And at a very young age, he was sharing this as a young boy. And his brothers who were older started to not like this. In fact, early in chapter 37, we see that they could not even say a kind word towards him. They hated him. And the reason they hated him was it was a combination of things, not just the fact that he was having these dreams, but also that they saw the favor. They saw the joy of Jacob. Why did Jacob have this joy? Well, again, it was the only son with Rachel, the one whom Jacob really loved. And so it was that miracle child. All right. And so now we're going to see how this plays out even further. There's more to the story to understand about narcissism as well. Now, we're going to pick up in verse 12 of chapter 37. Now, his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel, by the way, is Jacob's new name. So the Lord changed Jacob's name to Israel. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. Now, I want you to understand something of what's going on here. So Joseph is at home with his father, Israel, Jacob, while the other brothers who are older are out tending to the flocks. Now, one of the things we saw earlier is that Joseph oftentimes had a knack for going and watching what was going on with his older brothers and then reporting back to his dad that things weren't quite right. He would go back to Jacob, to Israel, and say, they're supposed to be watching the sheep and the flocks and feeding, but they're out there picking their nose and kicking rocks and sleeping. Something's not right, and something bad could happen. And the brothers knew this. They knew this. And Joseph's father appreciated this. Jacob, Israel, grew to appreciate this. So this becomes a task. And so now we see in verse 12, when his brothers had gone out to graze their flocks, Israel, or Jacob, told Joseph, "Okay, as you know, your brothers are out grazing the flocks now, so come, I'm going to send you to them. Why? to see if, and we see this in verse 14, go and see if all is well with your brothers and the flocks and bring word back to me. This is why he was sending them out, saying, listen, I trust you. You're going to tell me what's going on. Are they doing good? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Are they taking care of the animals? Are they taking care of their responsibilities? Go and check this out and bring it back to me. Joseph, this is your responsibility. It's important to understand this because this is a natural responsibility of superiority. If you look at it this way, the purpose that Joseph had at even a young age was a purpose of superiority. His job as a young boy was now to go out, see what his brothers were doing, and report it back. And now watch this. The other brothers who were older, they were not in a place where they really cared about if they were doing the right thing or the wrong thing. They were just doing whatever. They had their clique. They almost had like a tribe. And we see this as a huge part of narcissism. Narcissistic abuse, and narcissism lives in a very tribal mentality. They form a clique, and outsiders typically are not welcome. And maybe you've experienced this in your family or with siblings or in school or with groups of friends where you're going into a situation, and even if you are given a great purpose, when that clique or that tribe sees you coming, now you pose a threat to them and you're not a part of them, and they hate you and they resent you. Why? Because you have a superior purpose. They've formed what they're all about within their clique, and narcissists do that. Once they form a clique, let's say they start drinking or smoking or whatever, that's their clique. That's their group. That's their gang. And you are either a part of that or you're against that. Joseph's brothers did just that. They had their clique, which they watched the animals and did whatever they wanted to do. Joseph now was the only thing that shook them up, because Joseph represented this purpose that was superior, a superior purpose to make sure they were doing the right thing. They did not like that because they wanted, in their narcissism, to do whatever they wanted to do. Joseph now, the outsider to them. He was outsider because of his age. He was a lot younger. He was an outsider because he was favored by the father. And so they kept their group tight, and they did not like Joseph, and we're going to see exactly what happens as a result of that. So Joseph says, verse 13, very well. Verse 14, so he said to him, go and see if all is well with your brothers, with the flocks. Bring word back to me. He sent him off to the valley of Hebron. So there you go. Joseph, go spy on your brothers. Make sure they're not sleeping around. They're not sleeping on the job. Make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So again, Joseph was given that superiority of purpose even at a young age. Now, when Joseph arrived at Shechem, in verse 15, a man found him wandering around the fields and asked him, what are you looking for? Joseph replied, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks? They have moved on from here, the man answered. I heard them say, let's go down to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in a distance before he reached them. So at this point in time, Joseph's brothers actually saw him coming. So there's their group, there's their gang, there's that narcissistic tribe, if you will. All the brothers probably doing what they typically do, having an extended smoke break, kicking rocks, doing whatever they're doing, telling jokes, being crude. And again, they're much older than Joseph, and they see young Joseph coming in a distance, and they say, we know why he's here. He's not here because he's one of us. He's here because he's going to spy on us. He's here to ruin our fun. He's here. This is how narcissists view outsiders. This is how narcissistic people view somebody with superior purpose. So when you, for example, are moving in on your family dynamic or those groups of friends or those coworkers, they have their niche, they have their gang. You're coming into the situation, in their mind, they're saying you're not one of us. You're not one of us. You're here to ruin our fun. You're here to spy on our fun. You're here, and it may not be the truth. You may just want to connect with them. And I believe that Joseph wanted to connect desperately with his brothers. He wanted to fit in with them. He didn't want to have this superior purpose. He didn't want to be a favored one. He was a young boy. He probably wanted to have his older brothers care for him and love him, just like you when you're at work and you're in your family. You just want to be accepted. You want to have a good relationship with them. But narcissism, that spirit of narcissism that we talk about, that abusive nature that looks at that and says, no, that is threatening, because they sensed something about you. The brothers sensed something about Joseph they did not like. What they sensed was the superior purpose. The superior purpose. And this is important to understand. And if you understand this, you'll get eventually that you have a superior purpose over the narcissist that you have dealt with. The narcissists are making their decisions. They have their group. They have their gang. They're going to spend their lives doing their extended smoke breaks, having their parties, doing whatever. And that is their life. You, on the other hand, have a superior purpose. I have a superior purpose. They do not like that. They reject it and they hate it. And so we're going to see this right now as they saw young Joseph from a distance, right? They saw him at a distance before he reached them. They plotted to actually kill him. They plotted to kill their own brother Joseph. And we see this in narcissistic dynamics with family, coworkers. They may not plot to kill you, but they make no mistake about it. When they see you walking, they know that you're not a part of their group. You don't fit in. Make no mistake about it. They're plotting to figure out a way to get rid of you, either by attacking you verbally, insulting you, criticizing you. They don't want you there. Why? Because again, you have superior purpose. They don't want superior purpose within their walls, because then it changes their dynamic. Narcissists do not want your superior purpose in and around them, because it starts to infiltrate and change what they have going on, and then they have to change their life. In this case, Joseph's brothers would have had to become better at watching the herds. They didn't want to become better. They were fully happy with the way in which they watched the herds of animals. They were far away from their father, so nobody knew what they were really up to, and they enjoyed that. Narcissism enjoys living in this place where nobody knows what they're up to except just that core group, and they're fine with that. That's how they want to keep it. And if you display it all, the superior purpose, if you display it all, the integrity and the honesty that people need to have, it's going to rattle them. They're going to despise you. They're going to want to bury you. In this case, they truly wanted to bury young Joseph. Verse 19, here he comes, that dreamer. They said to each other, come now, let's kill him and throw him into these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. You could see the hatred and the animosity that the other brothers had. Here comes this young dreamer. Here comes this one to spy on us. Here comes this young one. And again, remember, young Joseph just wanted to fit in. He wanted to, no doubt, he just wanted to have older brothers, but they didn't see it that way. So verse 23, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe. They ripped it off. So they surrounded him. They ripped off his robe, the ornate robe that he was wearing, and they took him and threw him in a cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit before we get to that part. I missed a whole verse here. So after verse 19 and 20, when they said, let's see what comes of his dreams, there was a brother, Reuben, who's the oldest. Reuben was the firstborn of Leah. He stepped in the gap and said, listen, guys, let's not take his life. That's ridiculous. All right. So even amongst narcissists, and even when they're, sometimes they'll say, okay, let's not get too crazy. Reuben was that. Reuben was the voice and said, let's not do that. Let's not take his life. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and to take him back to his father. Reuben wanted to do the right thing, even in that group. It's possible that even in a narcissistic group, a narcissistic mob mentality, it's possible that there are some that are there trying to calm everybody down. There are, even within narcissistic groups, and maybe you've seen this, there are a few who are the peacemakers, where you have certain narcissistic people who absolutely would do whatever they can to hurt somebody. They don't care. You're going to have others in there who are like, no, don't. It's fine, whatever. How many of you have witnessed that, right? And it's important. These people within those groups play an important role because there are, in fact, more of the psychopathic, sociopathic narcissists who really don't care. And narcissists are gullible. And believe it or not, they do what others say if they're in a particular group. They're very gullible and they will listen. If other people in their own group say, don't do that or stop it, they'll stop. But it's when you or an outsider says, don't do that or stop it, and you have no support by anybody else, they don't listen. They go along with the majority because most narcissistic people are followers. They need a group of people. They need a tribe. They require this in order to know what they're doing because they have no independent identity. Now, Reuben here is the voice of reason. Within this narcissistic mob of brothers, Reuben is the one that's more independent. He's the one with the reason, says, no, let's not kill Joseph. Let's not shed any blood. And so as a result, then when Joseph came to him, they stripped him of his robe. So they gathered around him, stripped the robe off that Jacob or Israel made for him. They put him in an empty cistern, and a big cistern was a big water barrel, basically. That's what it was. So they found an empty one and with no water in it, and they put him inside of it, and they closed it up, and they sealed him in there. And then they sat down to eat their meal with young Joseph still in that cistern. They looked up and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, and their camels were loaded with spices and balm and myrrh. They were on their way to go to Egypt. Egypt was the biggest deal in the land at that time. Egypt was basically the United States or the China, whatever. Egypt was huge. Egypt was the dominant place. That's where all the trading went down. That's where anybody who was anybody lived, was in Egypt, right? They were making giant pyramids. They were sculpting all kinds of ancient stuff that we still see today, by the way. The pyramids of Giza, of Egypt, the Sphinx, all these things. You can only imagine. We see the broken down relics, but you can only imagine what these fascinating empire-like structures looked like back in this time when they were building it, when it was brand new. It was like fresh, brand new skyscrapers, right? That we see. This was Egypt, all right? Egypt, we are often in school, we're taught that it was a bunch of people just wearing diapers and headgear, pulling stuff with ropes. I don't believe that. I believe Egypt was very technological in how they did things. It was very awesome. Egypt was an awesome, when I say awesome, I mean awesome in capabilities, right? In their own capabilities. I'm not talking about their spiritual or moral ethics, but they were awesome in their capabilities. And so that was the place to be. And they were on their way to Egypt. And so in verse 28, when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. They sold their brother. So one way or another, when we're dealing with narcissistic tribalism, narcissistic mob mentality, make no mistake about it, the goal is to get rid of you. They will sell you off. They will hurt you to the point of making you leave. The narcissist that got rid of, that pushed you and drove you out of their lives. Maybe it's family. Maybe it's siblings. Maybe it's your ex-spouse. Maybe whoever the case may be. Yes, they wanted to drive you out. Why did they want to drive you out? Again, it comes down to your superior purpose, your superiority of purpose, your integrity, your morals, the way everything that you are, which is everything that they have tried so hard and they don't want to be. They don't want to be. And so they will drive you out. I've been driven out by these people. And so have you. And so this is why oftentimes when we talk how it feels like a death, when you leave these relationships, when you get away from this toxic family, this toxic relationship, and it feels like a death, and that's because it has been a death. It's been a death of that relationship. It's been a death of that of what you thought you could have. That has died. And I believe that Joseph experienced this death right here as they sold him and he couldn't do anything about it. And I'm sure he was screaming, guys, stop, stop, please. And his own brothers, can you imagine the betrayal that he felt as his brothers had him trapped in a cistern and then they sold him as young Joseph was screaming, help me, help me. Just like you and I, when we were dealing with narcissistic people in our lives, we were trying to reason with them, please, let's fix this. What's going wrong? How can we make this better? I don't want to be hurt anymore. I want to be a part of your life. How many of you tried this form of reasoning with narcissistic people? Why do you not like me? Why is there so much fighting? Why? I care for you. Why? It doesn't matter. When that narcissistic mob mentality makes up their mind that you are of a superior purpose and you threaten them, then they want to kill off that relationship because it doesn't serve them. Your superiority doesn't serve them. Narcissists operate and they live only by them being superior. You having superiority of any kind will never serve them. And this is the truth of that. And so when the merchants came by, they pulled Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who then took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, the boy isn't here. Where can I turn now? Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. So Reuben, the one who was the voice of reason, remember, his plan was as he was going along, and Reuben's the oldest, as he was going along with the other brothers and saying, okay, keep him in the cistern. His plan all along was to get him up out of there and return him back to the father. He knew that the brothers were full of anger and rage and narcissistic rage and this and that, but he didn't believe they would truly, he tried his best to truly get them to not hurt him. So when Reuben went back and saw that he was no longer there, it says he tore his robe. Reuben was angry. He was furious at what his brothers had done. He was in disbelief. But because he was a part of that narcissistic tribe, because he is an accomplice in it, right? He did, in his own mind, maybe he thought he did enough, but he didn't do enough. If he was truly bold, being the oldest, he could have stopped them altogether, but he didn't. He became an accomplice when he was the one who made the decision to put Joseph in the cistern. And so then they planned the rest of their scheme out. They did take the robe that they tore from Joseph, dipped it in some goat's blood, and then they took the robe back to the father and said, we found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe. So they took the robe that Joseph had, they mingled it up, probably tore it, whatever, dipped it in some blood, went back and shared it with the father, saying, examine this, look at this, see if this belongs to your young son, Joseph. We found this. That was their story. We found this on the ground. Leading Jacob to believe that young Joseph was mauled or eaten by a wild animal. Verse 33, it says that Jacob recognized it and said, it is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. Verse 34, then Jacob tore his clothes, put on a sackcloth, and mourned for his son for many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave. So his father wept for him. Verse 36, meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. And so we see how ultimately this story is going to continue on, but we see a lot of pain. We see a lot of pain and anguish for Joseph, because Joseph does have a superior purpose. Superior purpose does not come in this life without pain. It truly doesn't. And the pain that Joseph is experiencing is actually going to push and drive him to his superior purpose. But the pain is also in the father. Narcissism and narcissistic abuse affects everybody that it touches. I know that you feel as though the narcissistic abuse that you've experienced was only affecting you. It wasn't. There were other people around who witnessed it, who were confused, who just didn't have the boldness to stand up, to step up. It affected them as well. And so we see that the narcissism of these brothers, of this tribe, and their cruelty, and the narcissistic spirit, that cold-heartedness, caused them to not care about Joseph, to even be willing to kill him. And with that, we are going to wrap this up. And so join me next week. We will be jumping into Genesis chapter 38. And I do want to thank you and bless you for being here, being a part of Royal We Fellowship. Again, if you are new to Royal We Fellowship, thank you so much for being here. And you can support it if you are inspired. Support is inspired, not required. You can do so in the links down below. And I will be making videos all throughout this week on the organic Royal We channel. I will also be talking more about Repel for Mission STL, which, by the way, if some of you are not followers on Instagram yet, I encourage you to follow me on Instagram, because I'm going to, in the weeks leading up to Repelling Down 19 Stories, I am going to be breaking this fear. And I'm going to be sharing this story on my Instagram more and more as that goes on. So in the next few weeks, I'm going to be more active on my Instagram, using that to kind of share how I'm breaking my own fear here and rappelling down 19 stories, because I'm kind of scared of that. But there's still opportunity for you to be a supporter of that as well. Down, you'll find the link for Repel for Mission STL down there. You can support that as well. And have a blessed weekend, everybody. We'll be back next Saturday morning. Shabbat Shalom. And we'll see you next weekend as we continue on in our story of Joseph. And have a great week, everyone. Bye.